Yo, this room is packed. This is wild. Okay, yeah, I'm struggling with this heat. Okay, cool. So I'm gonna run you guys through kind of kickstarting our design system at N26. Quick show of hands before we start. Who here's a designer, product designer, research or whatever? Cool, cool. Who's an engineer? Just so that I know what kind of jokes I can crack. Yeah, cool. Who knows about N26? Oh, thank God. Okay, cool. So I don't have to go too in depth about what N26 is. Brief little intro though. What we're trying to do at N26 is build a bank that the world loves to use. This started in 2015 and obviously started with like complete paperless account opening, instant money management and all these things. One of our newer features, Spaces, if anybody's used it. And at a glance, we serve 2.5 million customers roughly, 24 markets, 3 locations that we're in, a lot of funding, scary, and a lot of employees now. And I want to stretch this talk in 3 main categories. First one being kind of the kickoff, why a design system, why now, how we got started. Then kind of to the foundation of it, how did we then actually start building it? Where did we try and continue to? And the third big part, kind of the future outlook. What are we working on now? What are you going to work on in the next couple of months? So number one question we asked, like, why now? Like, why do we need a design system right now? We kind of knew we needed a design system. Obviously, all the things from like consistency, delivering quicker, et cetera, et cetera. I think most people know why design systems are built, but why now? When I started, late 2017, yo, this is such a weird color. This is an orange. These brand colors are gonna look way off. So when I started, we were 15 designers and front-end engineers, kind of a manageable team. Pretty easy job still to stay quite consistent across different products. Fast forward to today, we're at 80, right? So gets a lot more difficult. You have a lot more designers, you have a lot more engineers working on a lot more products. It gets pretty hard to maintain. And obviously, when I started, we were just in Berlin. We were over at Klosterstraße. And if you had a question about some other product, it was pretty simple. You'd walk up to the designer's desk, the engineer's desk, and be like, yo, why does this work this way? Can we change this? It was pretty easy. But last year, we opened up in New York. We've got some designers over there. Late last year, we opened in Barcelona. We have some designers down there as well. And then very recent announcement, we're opening an office in Vienna. And this is like super daunting because you're on Hangouts the entire time. You're trying to align across offices. You're having meetings on Hangouts with a bunch of people. Trying to stay super consistent gets a lot more difficult. So we kind of knew we needed this design system, but we had no idea where to start. So this is kind of intros, how to do this. And as we just heard in this last talk, it's a product. It's not a project. It's something that has to be maintained. It has to have a team behind it. And because it's a product, it can fail. This sounds super grim on a slide, but it can. It's uncool if it does, but it can, and we really wanted to avoid it. And one of the reasons why it can fail is obviously low adoption. You've built this banging system, and you're so proud of it, but then no one uses it. And it's just like, why did I put in all this effort? It's just really lame if it happens. Another one is low understanding. So people know it, people are using it, but they have no idea when things are used, how things are used, how to use it. And obviously also low support. So you launch V1, everybody's super hyped, you got some components in there, but then no one contributes. It just stays with like 2-3 components. You have buttons, you have headers, and that's about it. So we wanted to avoid this. We sat down with designers, with engineers, with product managers, and we're like, where are these pain points? Like, how can we improve your workflow? And like David, who's sitting out there in the back, he was like, yo, there's no documentation on what we have right now. Like, I don't know when to use things. I don't know when to use what. So, you know, that was one thing that we learned. We also learned that obviously engineers and designers want to have the best time using this system. Like, it has to be the easiest thing to use. And we also wanted to be accessible. So those were kind of our 3 key pillars that we learned from these kind of rounds of interviews. It has to be the easiest way to use, easiest thing to use to build these products. There has to be super good documentation on when to use these components and the system. And it has to be accessible because we're building the bank the world loves to use and not just the like able-sighted people can use. So we kind of got started. And this next thing I want to touch on is a project that I worked on before, friend referral. And, oh, this cool slide, wait, do your homework. That's the main thing that we learned from this round. So we kind of jumped in and we were like, okay, cool, we know what we're building. Let's have a check on like cross-platform consistency, see kind of what the status quo is. So we checked our sketch files, we checked everything we had, and we had some colors, we had some textiles, we had a couple components, and not much documentation. And I asked the iOS engineers, we were like, yo, let's check what we have. And we had a lot of colors. We had a lot of the same colors. We had 0 textiles. You know, all these were like manually just made. We had a couple components, that was cool. We had some buttons. We had a couple things that were in there, but no real documentation. Android was way ahead of us. You know, they were already like using, obviously also a lot of the same colors, but they had textiles. They had like a good amount of components already pre-built and some documentation. It was pretty sick. We were like, yeah, I mean, this is kind of a cool starting point, but then you kind of compare the three and it's just like, you know, none of this is aligned. All these colors are off, all these textiles are off. So we were like, okay, we're gonna have to start super, super early stage and just like start with the fundamentals. So a little intro to this was this friend referral thing I was talking about. And specifically about this little outline color right here. Had a little conversation with my engineers on the team. It kind of looked like this. Is this the right gray? You know, and I was like, oh, it should be the same one we used on the other product, you know. It's just a divider line, it's probably the same color. And then Android engineer chimes in and was like, oh, I thought it was this one. You know, it's that one. I go back to my sketch files and I'm like, I'll double check. And I have something completely different. So we're all talking about the same color, but you know, in the end, here's 3 different colors. You know, it shouldn't be. So we were like, okay, we're just gonna take the time, rework our complete neutral palette and just be like, yes, we have these hex codes. We have this like representation of what these colors look like. We've given them names on this HSP scale. You know, we've got all the way from complete black to complete white, a couple in between. But can anybody tell me which color we're using for dividers? Is it this one? Is it this one? It's a guessing game. Nobody really knows. So we were like, okay, this isn't gonna work. This isn't the nicest thing that our engineers can work with. So we decided to abstract this one level up and just create categories of colors. These variables are gonna help me out with a banging slide in like 10 slides from now. But now we have divider.standard and it spits out this hex code when you type in. So from now on, if an engineer needs to use a color for a divider, they just type out color.divider.standard and then it spits out the right hex code. And it's none of this like going back and forth. And we did this with color. Obviously there's a lot of other fundamentals like typography. We looked at spacing, iconography, shadows, corner radii, opacity layers, list goes on. It's long stuff, and I could talk about hours for these, but I'm not gonna, because it'll get boring and real nerdy. So we had the fundamentals, we had them laid down, we were like, okay, this is cool, let's get some components going, because this is where it gets mega interesting. And does anybody use N26 in this room? Good couple, that's sick. All right, so now another learning, take your time with these fundamentals. So this is like a little transaction cell that N26 users have probably seen before. We have an icon on the left. We have a little 2 pieces of typography going on and a little right accessory showing how much, you know, money came in or out. We see this pattern also coming in when you signed up. You've got a couple of checkboxes you have to tick, terms and conditions to agree to. And if you use spaces, you might have seen this thing where you have a little spaces image on the right, on the left. You have some typography and maybe a selector going on. We kind of saw this as this first like component everybody's going to be eager to use. And we called it the 3-item container. It's a very generic name, but it has left accessories, main information, and right accessories. And we built this, and within the design system team, we were like, oh my God, this is so good. This is so good. We were like, oh. You know, we were sitting there and I had this live demo. Dama came up and he showed me on iOS and I was like, this is the bomb, right? No one has to like discuss, is this 16 pixels here? Is it 16? No, you just type in toggle and it's there. You know, so this was sick and I'd go up to Moritz, I remember, and I was like, dude, this 3-item container, it's it. Like, this is the thing. But, you know, Moritz doesn't know about it. He doesn't know how to use it. You know, there's no documentation on it. So we kind of realized, okay, this really has to be super public. And this is where this thing comes in, right? The system glossary. So within the design system team, we decided to build these apps on iOS and Android to showcase the things that we've built in the design system. Let's have a little look through the app. So you're kind of introed into this design system. You get a heads up as to which version you're on. And then you see these fundamentals that I talked about. And let's jump into typography. Color, I mean, sorry. So we jump into color. And then we have this thing, right? So dividers.standard. Oh, it's in here. It's the right X code. And this is cool. And this is the slide I was talking about. That's going to be super sick. See that icon up there? Oh, dark mode. So you can just switch it right through. Big reveal. No. So obviously with these, variables, we can give theming a place to live. So we can create multiple versions of the same variable that just throw out different hex codes depending on which theme you're in. And this was mega cool. Like we showed this to people and it was like that mind-blowing moment where people were like, this is sick. So, and we did this for the 3-item container. So we kind of have like a intro as to what this 3-item container can do. We have a little live demo. And then you can set up these 3 things. So the start, main, and end atom. And you can click on change and you can fill it with different things. So system icon, spot icon, checkbox, profile, all these things. And you can configure what you need and it will throw out this component for you. And this is where I bring it full circle. And who can guess what these rows are made out of? All right, there's 3-item containers all over again. So we kind of tested how these components work by building this app, knowing that it's the easiest way to build these rows. It's the easiest thing to build with. I think the screen took like 10 minutes to build. Devs are crazy. It's fun stuff. So really what I want to get to is write your docs from this. Because without us having this glossary, it doesn't have to be as intense as having a full iOS app. It can be Google Docs. It can just be in Sketch. It can be anywhere. But you need to have people see this documentation. So recapping this kind of step, we wanted to make sure it was the best possible option for developers and designers to use. We needed to have bomb-in documentation on it, and we needed it to be accessible. And throughout this process, we kind of made sure that was true. But like, where to now? So there's 3 things I want to touch on. One is basically the talk we just heard. So this is all about contribution. So working with design tools, obviously they're not as advanced as engineering tools. We don't have GitHub. We don't have all these established processes in the design community. Sketch is really not that cool if you compare it to other things. Pretty difficult to use with systems. Second thing is contributing to the system. Obviously, the slides that we just saw are going to be super cool for us to just steal and look at. Thanks for that. And then also handing off to engineers. So obviously, we released a system, and then people are still exporting their screens to Zeppelin. And then you can't really tell which component's being used because it's just a static screen with not much documentation behind it. So that's one thing we're trying to tackle is contribution. Next thing that maybe you can tell I'm super into animation on these slides is these extended fundamentals that I'm going to talk about. One of them is haptics, because God, they're so good. The Taptic engine in the iPhone is like everything to me. So getting these haptics actually systemized and into the glossary so that people know that they're out there, they know they can use them, and they know how to. Another one is sound, really making sure that we can actually create these really immersive experiences, not just using visual standards like typography and color, but also integrating haptics and sound. And then also animation, so standardizing this across the platform. And the last one that I'm super excited about, is there a back-end engineer in here maybe who might geek out with me over this? Oh, damn shame. Well, it's this thing called back-end for front-end. So this is obviously a little bit down the line, but once we have enough components to actually be able to roll this out, there's this super cool stuff you can do with it. So like rendering UI based on a back-end response, where you could, for example, just return a section header, return a card, and return a list of checklist items. Get to the office, start the presentation, say thanks for listening. And we can render this across platforms, not just on one single platform. And this is obviously a little bit down the line, but this is where it gets really exciting when we can actually change UI on the fly and not hard code everything on the front end and have to wait for Apple release cycles and everything. So there's only one real thing that I have left to do, and that's thank you for listening. Oh yeah, shameless plug. Thank you. Come join the team if you're into N26. We're always hiring. Yeah, questions?
Hi, I'm curious to learn if you have UX copywriters or if you're including any UX copy guidelines in your documentation.
We don't currently have any UX copywriters, so this is all coming down back to the product designers. It is kind of planned though. So I think it's super important. I know delivery does a really good job on this, and actually for every component having guidelines as to what kind of content can fit in, which I think is super awesome. We want to get there, but it's not implemented yet.
Hi, I'm Sylvester. Most of your slides were iPhone only or mobile only. I know N26 is scaling for the web as well. How will your design system scale for the web?
So yeah, thanks for the question actually on web. So when we kicked this off a couple months ago, we didn't have any web resources to actually go into the design systems team. This has changed and we're just kind of catching up with these fundamentals currently. When we rebuilt the web app about a year ago, we actually started with a completely fresh code base on the front end. So even then, we already started systemizing color, but it wasn't aligned with the actual design team and all these efforts within the design system team. So yes, we will scale this to web as well, but it's because we didn't have resources a couple months ago, but we're catching up.
Hi. I was wondering, since you guys, from what I understood, you already had the app going and then you built a design system. So I was wondering how, like what you could say about this process, because that's, I think, one of the hardest things when you have stuff in production and you have to deal with the day-to-day problems that you're solving of this existing software and everything, and then taking the time and getting the buy-in to actually create this thing sort of theoretically and
yeah, no, for sure. This is kind of what we ran into straight from the beginning. So obviously there are a lot of products already built. I mean, the entire app is built without the system. So throwing the system now at this stage, obviously there's a lot of things to refactor and rebuild on the front end. We have a couple products that are already working on it that are like quite easy to rebuild with the components that we have currently. But a lot of this comes down to just proving the actual value to like product owners to get the buy-in. A lot of this can be reached through things like if you use the system, you're automatically on a fundamental level supporting accessibility because you're just using this new color palette. You're also supporting dark mode then from the get-go. And it's also just because it's easy to use, it's easy to maintain as well because you're just not keeping this old tech debt. But yeah, it's super difficult to get the buy-in from like especially massive products. Yeah, it's a lot of just proving the why and how long it would take.
Cool, thanks.
Thanks, mate. That was interesting. Just one question. If I see like this backend to front end thing, I imagine there's not much that the front end dev, if there's one anymore, can change on it. Like how flexible are your front end teams? Do you like, how strict are you with your components?
Okay. I think I'm going to split it up into if front end still kind of has a job, I think is what you're getting at. Obviously, I don't think every single product is completely perfect to be just implemented with BFF. So back end for front end. There are times I think when it's going to be a no-brainer just to use back end for front end when you're like rendering things that are country specific and you need different fields. For example, settings pages that are quite generic to build. These can be built quite easily, I think, with back end to front end. Other products obviously are a lot more customizable and like inherently more difficult to build on the front end logic wise, where I think back end for front end isn't as scalable in my opinion. So with these components, now getting to the question of how flexible it is with these components, because we're still quite in the infancy of our design system, I don't think we've faced this problem yet. So obviously now that we have people contributing to the system, we have a lot of people with a lot of different requirements, and how we're currently trying to handle it is just to agree on an MVP of a component, and then for now let teams build on top of it custom. And then if we see patterns repeating, we just include it into the actual component. But for now, we actually go for like this kind of MVP approach of this is the basic generic component that we'll need that people can build on. And if we need more specificity, we just add it later down the road. Cool.
I have two questions. One, your documentation system, what do you run it on, and how do you put changes in there and keep it aligned with the code? And the second, when you showed your libraries, asset libraries, and the colors, is it possible like to change a color in a centralized place and it's distributed all around over all systems and they automatically pull it and don't need to think about what have I done, or I changed the color and the others still use the old color or something like that?
Okay, so first question, sorry, I think I'm already spacing on that first question. First question was, oh yeah, how do you
Documentation.
maintain that documentation and how is it actually
what kind
built?
of system you're using?
Okay, so the iOS and Android are like built natively, and then the iOS is distributed through TestFlight to testers within the company through their emails. And the Android one is just an APK that we can send around to anyone who needs to install it. The changes that are done to the app are done manually by the actual product teams. So we had a contribution for a certain component last week, and the developer just went in and added it to the documentation app on iOS and Android within their own product teams. And then they just branched that to the actual master of the glossary. So that's how we handle that. And the second question was if these fundamentals that I showed are coming from a centralized place. Currently they're not. Currently they are actually handled on each platform, but we have a centralized file that has all of the fundamentals listed. What I would want to get to in future is that we actually have that file dictating these colors, so that we're not maintaining 3 libraries, web, Android, and iOS, but we're just maintaining one, and then it translates it to the different platforms. But we're not there yet.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hi, sorry. I don't know if it's a problem for you for different regions. I guess you are having the same design, but theoretically, if some region, if another, like, I don't know, opening an office somewhere else needs a different main accent color or something, do you have in this your mind how you tackle this, like differences between like having a main system and subsystems, or it's just not a problem for you at all?
So I think what you're getting at is like localization in different markets, kind of?
For example, if like, I don't know, that color, for example, is not working in that region because of some reasons.
Yep. To be honest, we haven't run into this problem yet. Not sure how we would tackle it if it does. So I don't really have an answer for you, to be honest.
Okay.
We haven't run into that problem, so not sure.
I'm sorry again. What is the policy on A/B testing, or do you do this at the moment, and how do you do it? What is the process of A/B testing in your system? And just a follow up to that question, and how granular can you make A/B testing? Like, can you just change the color or the or the icons in the 3-point setup you said, or the 3-point setup itself?
So A/B testing in general. Currently, we're actually working on A/B testing system to like actually have a nice like way to handle this. It is, however, currently from product team to product team, handled in each team separately. When using the system, though, they could set up A/B tests that just use different colors. But it's handled. It's not handled like systematically. It's just from team to team.
Yeah, but one follow up to that is you have a set of colors,
yeah.
And what if a team in a particular country says none of these colors are working and this color is working for their use case because of the country specific color choice, right? Mm-hmm. How do you handle this request?
Yeah. Currently, like same answer as before, we haven't run into this yet. When we do, I mean, like I'm spitballing here at this point, but No, all good. No, I mean, in a ideal world, we would have a way to have variants of a color, like of a variable, to test against each other. Because this hasn't been established yet, we haven't done it. But ideally, it would be in the system to test. If it is just a one-off test that we just wanted to try out, then I would also probably just say use colors that aren't as variables and just test them against each other. And then if we see that one is working way better, replace the color that's in the variable.
Any more questions? All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.